So at the end of your meeting, the prospect says, you know what, Brandon, everything sounds great, but we need to think about it and we'll get back to you. What do you say? In today's video, I'll show you exactly what to do. Anytime a prospect tells you they want to think about it, they don't move forward, they don't sign the contract, they don't give you the commitment to move forward, one of three things went wrong. Starting with number one. Up front, before you go and see a prospect face to face, before you have that sales conversation, there's a couple things you're gonna wanna do. Number one, which is something I teach all of my students to do, which is sending a pre-listing packet or information to the prospect with the answers to the questions we already know they're going to ask. So in my case, when I teach real estate agents or we're going to interview for the job of listing a home, there's only a certain number of questions a seller's ever going to ask. What are you gonna do to market my property? What has your experience been? And what type of commission do you charge? And what are the terms in which you offer? Well, wouldn't it only make sense that we get that information up front to the consumer, to the seller, before the meeting? This way, the prospect has time to process what it is that we can do to help them from their current situation to accomplish their goal. And we don't have to spend time talking about it at the presentation. We don't have to spend time talking through all the details. The prospect should get that information up front. The next thing you should do prior to your meeting is send the prospect a video, okay? You're gonna send them a short video clip so they get to know you better. They get to start to build this relationship. You get an opportunity to build influence with the prospect prior to the meeting. They start to learn a little bit about your personality. They start to learn about what it's going to be like meeting with you. The video is designed to help lower the anxiety that the prospect might have about meeting with you and ultimately make their decision with moving forward with you a lot easier. The next thing you want to do before you go to the face-to-face presentation or the face-to-face meeting is have what I call the upfront agreement. Simply put, before you agree to meet with the prospect, you and the prospect should be having a simple conversation that sounds like this. Mr. Prospect, when we meet, I'm gonna walk you through exactly what I can do to help you get the property sold at the highest price and net you the most money that I possibly can. And at the end of that meeting, you can simply decide if working with me makes any sense or not. Fair enough? And when you get the prospect to say, yeah, you know what, that's fair, that sounds reasonable, that prospect and you have an expectation that when we meet, we're gonna walk through what it's going to look like to work together. And at the end of the meeting, we're gonna have another conversation about moving forward. And you get the prospect to agree to that expectation before you even meet. So when you've done all of this right in part one, which is setting up for the meeting, and you've done all three of those things, now you're prepared to go to a sales presentation or to a sales meeting where most untrained salespeople aren't doing those things. They're going in blind. They're setting themselves up to get, I want to think it over, because we haven't got the prospect the information they need to make a decision. They haven't sent them a video so they can see who they're meeting with and what they're like. And then lastly, they haven't had a conversation up front about what the meeting is going to be about. There's been no agreement or expectation set. The other thing that I see people doing wrong time and time again is not setting the agenda. One of the things I teach all of my students to do, if you're a real estate agent, you're in my program, you know what I'm talking about. When we set the agenda, or maybe you call it a foreshadow, at the beginning of the meeting, you need to have a simple conversation with the prospect that sounds similar to what we did with the upfront agreement on the telephone. Now when you're live in person, you're gonna do something very, very similar. You're gonna say, Mr. Prospect, I appreciate the opportunity to talk with you today. I'm excited to walk through exactly what it is that I can do to help you. I'm excited to learn more about, your future plans. And then at the end of this meeting, you and I can have a conversation as to whether or not we both think it makes sense to move forward to do business together. Do you think that that's reasonable? And that's called gaining agreement. So we set the agenda, we let the prospect know what they can expect in this meeting, just like we did on the telephone. It's all about setting clear expectations, and then we gain agreement. And if the prospect says, yeah, you know what, that's reasonable, that makes sense, you're helping to lower the prospect's anxiety yet again, getting you closer to help both you and the prospect get to the point of the decision. We don't care if the decision is yes or no. We don't care about that. All that we care is that we have clarity at the end of our meeting whether or not we're moving forward together. Now, number 3, the third thing that I see that amateur salespeople or untrained salespeople are making is when they get a I want to think it over objection at the end of the sales meeting with the prospect, they're like a deer in headlights. They don't know how to respond. A lot of untrained salespeople will fall for what I call the mirage of hope. They take the prospect telling them, hey, everything sounds great. I really liked what you had to say today. I just need some time to kind of think it through before I make a decision. The untrained salesperson takes that as bait. They actually believe that the prospect needs to think it over before making a decision, but not you, not after watching this video. What we need to do, if you did part 1 correctly, okay, and you did part 2 correctly, and you get to the end of your sales meeting, and the prospect still says, you know what, everything sounds great, I just need some time to think it over, this is what you're going to do. It's called isolating the objection. So in my world, in the real estate space, what I teach all of the real estate agents in my program to do, when you go to interview to list somebody's home, there's only a couple of things that are really concerning that the prospect may have to think about it, or the prospect maybe not comfortable enough to move forward with you, but just not coming out, not having the guts to tell you what it is holding them back with moving forward. As an example, if you go to sell a prospect's property, okay, certainly you need to talk about a pricing strategy, what you're gonna list the property at, where you're gonna sell it at, right? Then you're gonna walk the seller through numbers, okay? And what they can expect to walk away with from the sale of the property, what your commissions look like. And then lastly, you're gonna talk through hopefully the terms or your value proposition as to what it might look like for the prospect to do business with you, increasing their confidence, making them comfortable working with you, okay? So in part 3, when you're isolating objections and the prospect says, you know what, I need time to think it through, all you're simply gonna do is this. Number 1, we never argue. We always respond to objections being agreeable. So I simply say, you know what, that makes a ton of sense. If I was you, I would probably want some time to think about it too. This is a massive decision. So that's part 1. Now you're showing empathy. You're showing the prospect that you care. You're humanizing yourself with the prospect. You're not coming across as a high pressure salesperson. This is helping yet again to lower the prospect's anxiety, making it easier for them to say yes to you. Then part 2, when you respond to this objection, you start to isolate what things they could be concerned about. So in the example that I gave, if you're a real estate agent and you're interviewing to list somebody's property, you simply say, Mr. Prospect, can I ask you a question? When we talked about our pricing strategy, and you and I talked about our list price of $350,000, is that something that you are comfortable with? If they say yes, the pricing strategy makes all the sense in the world, perfect. You keep moving forward. Okay, great. And now, Mr. Prospect, when I broke down the numbers and what you could expect to walk away with, and I showed you a little bit about my flexible commission program, are you comfortable with all those numbers, or did you have any questions? No, Brandon, makes all the sense in the world. I'm absolutely comfortable with all the numbers that you walked me through. Okay, great. And then lastly, can I ask you, are you comfortable working with me as your real estate agent and all the terms that we discussed tonight? Yeah, you know what, Brandon? We are absolutely comfortable with all of that. We just really need some time to kind of think this through to make sure that, we're making the right decision. Now, if you go through all of the major things that the prospect could be concerned with, and they don't give you any more information about anything that they're concerned with, you're simply gonna ask for the business. I'm gonna show you an example in just a second. However, if you go through isolating, the objections, you start to isolate the different things that the prospect could potentially have an issue with, and they say, yeah, you know what, Brandon, I know you recommended $350,000, but we really think the property could sell for more than that. Ah, I see. So it's not that they had to think about it. It's more so they were concerned about the price. This is the value of this strategy that I call isolating objections. We're going through what potentially the prospect could have problems with or could have concerns with, one at a time. And we're trying to discover, do they really have to think this through, or is there something else that they just didn't feel comfortable telling me? That's what isolating objections will do. Now, if you get through all of the possible things that they could be concerned with, and they still say, listen, yeah, I'm comfortable with everything, Brandon, I just need some time to kind of think it through, you're going to simply respond with absolute respect for the prospect and ask for the business, giving and letting them off the hook at the same time. Here's what it sounds like. So you say, Mr. Prospect, I can completely respect that. And again, if I was you, this is absolutely a massive decision. We're talking about your house and potentially who the right person is to get the property sold. So why don't we do this? If you're comfortable with everything that we talked about tonight, which we discussed, why don't we go ahead and get some paperwork completed? I won't do anything until tomorrow. This will give you and your wife some time to kind of think things through, make sure that it's a good fit, make sure there's no additional concerns that arise, and tomorrow we can simply have a conversation whether or not we should continue moving forward or not. Does that seem reasonable? And yet again, we go back to the same strategy. This is called an upfront agreement. And the prospect says, yeah, you know what? That makes sense, and you're gonna ask for the business with confidence yet again. And as soon as you get past that, as soon as you can get the consumer to sign off on the agreement, you've pretty much gotten the deal. It's been very rare where I use that strategy, get the client to sign the agreement, and the next day comes and they just say, you know what, we're not gonna move forward. They just need help getting over being uncomfortable moving forward with you. And when you walk them through this strategy exactly how I outlined in today's video, you'll find yourself getting a lot more contracts signed at your sales meeting. So if any of this made sense and you want to talk about possibly coaching and training with me, I put a link right underneath this video. Let's jump on a simple phone call. Let's talk about what it could look like for us to work together if you're a real estate agent. And then you can decide whether or not it makes any sense for us to work together, right? Same strategy. And if this video has provided you value and it helped you with something, I would ask for your help in return with subscribing to the channel, which helps to support the channel here on YouTube. And then let me know if you have any questions in the comment section, and I'll see you guys in another video very soon. Thank you so much for watching today's video.